The follow-up to Alien from 1979, Aliens was directed by James Cameron, written by James Cameron and Gale and stars Sigourney Weaver, who returns as Ellen Ripley, the sole surviving crew member of the space towing vessel Nostromo, a ship owned and operated by the Weyland Yutani Corporation, which was destroyed after the crew picked up an alien life form after investigating a mysterious distress signal on company orders. The film picks up 57 years after the events of Alien, after Ripley has been drifting through space in hypersleep on board the Narcissus shuttle, which she used to escape from the Nostromo. Before we get to the movie itself, I'll go over the version I watched for making my review. The version I watched here is the 4K Blu-ray, which only released a short while ago. It comes with 3 discs, one is the 4K Blu-ray, the second a regular 1080p Blu-ray, and lastly a bonus features disc. Something that gets talked about a lot with this presentation is the use of AI to remove the film grain, a point that has a lot of people divided. James Cameron himself has actually stated that one thing he was never happy with regarding Aliens is the amount of grain, as at the time that was just what they had to work with, and there wasn't much that could be done about it. But with today's technology, he was able to remove most of it. But this has a lot of people online discussing whether or not this was the right call to make, as many people liked the look how it was before. Me personally, I actually did like the way this version looked, with less artifacts and stuff on the screen, and it had more of a clean look to it, as well as a really high level of detail, especially in people's faces up close, where it almost looks like the actor is in the room with you. Although I don't disagree with anyone who prefers the grainy filmic look though, and I do still enjoy the look of an older film. Another thing they changed is the colour filtering, as some older versions had a very heavy blue tint, but here it's a little bit warmer and feels a bit more balanced and neutral than before. Again, not something that bothers me either way, and I don't really have a preference, but I did notice it. I have also previously seen the movie on normal Blu-ray, DVD and VHS in the past. For this review, I actually did watch both the theatrical cut and the director's cut, which is called the 1990 Special Edition, and I can say with the utmost confidence that I definitely do prefer the theatrical cut, as despite a few cool scenes being missing from it, improves the pacing 100% over the Special Edition in my opinion, which I prefer for repeat viewings. I would recommend the Special Edition if you've not seen it before though, just to see the extra scenes, but for a repeat viewing I wholeheartedly prefer the theatrical cut, as it not only tightens things up but it actually makes Hadley's Hope more mysterious, as the scenes showing the colony before the aliens invaded are absent, so we the audience have the same level of understanding as the heroes of the film do, so the colony is as mysterious and unknown to us as it is them, and it's like we're all exploring it together rather than us basically knowing what happened beforehand. I would probably say, if I were to make my own cut, I would basically just keep the theatrical version as it is, but I'd just add in the parts where Ripley finds out about her daughter Amanda having passed away during the time she was missing, especially with Amanda being the character from Alien Isolation, and the scene with the machine gun turrets, as when we see the ammo counters going down, it's a really nice touch that adds some more urgency and makes the situation feel that little bit more dire. So the main thing most people will refer to when comparing Aliens to Alien is the shift to an almost entirely different genre, going from horror to action, something that they actually pulled off flawlessly, as it feels like they are expanding the scope of the story being told, where in the first film it's just one xenomorph in a more isolated setting, but in Aliens there are multiple xenomorphs and we have more characters and a larger environment for the film to take place in. Another franchise that this tonal progression reminds me of is actually the difference between Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, where the sequel retains a lot of the horror of the first entry, but takes it to the next level, so it's like the first entry, it's all unknown and mysterious, but then in the second we have more of an understanding, and it's like it's our turn to bring the fight to the creatures and the bad guys. The whole setup of Aliens is done flawlessly and really does an amazing job of introducing all the characters and familiarising us with them, which is impressive given this film has a larger cast than the previous film, but manages to do so just as well. There is a strong military theme with most of the characters being a platoon of futuristic colonial space marines. They do a great job with the music, with a lot of military drums and stuff like that, and it has a very heroic and bombastic theme. The Marines are there to investigate a colony that has gone dark, which so happens to have been built on the very same planet they found the alien on in the first film, and Ripley agrees to accompany them as an advisor. Just like the first film, each character is given a distinct look and personality, and are pretty much all memorable characters. Even though they are a military unit, so have to wear a uniform, they are still easily distinguishable from one another, and the actors all give amazing performances. I won't list all the characters as I don't want this review to drag on for too long, but I'll briefly go over the most important and memorable ones. We of course have Ripley, who is found after having survived the events of the first film, but she is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and survivor's guilt, giving her nightmares, and she is also in trouble with the company after setting the ship to self-destruct and them not believing her story. But after the colony built on the planet during the years she's been absent goes dark, she eventually agrees to join the Marines and a Weyland Yutani rep in investigating both to help and to seek closure. Newt is the only survivor of the colony, as she managed to hide from the xenomorphs. As her own daughter had died while she was gone, Ripley kind of adopts Newt as her own since she has lost her parents. Carter Burke is an executive from Weyland Yutani who represents the company, as it's their colony that they've lost contact with. He seems like a good guy at first, but he turns out to be a scumbag who basically exploits Ripley to help him find the xenomorph so he can bring back a sample for the company's bioweapons division, pretty much trying to complete Ash's purpose in the last film. Bishop is an android owned by the US Colonial Marine Corps. What's interesting here is how in the first film the android was bad, and so Ripley doesn't trust Bishop at first, but he is actually good, so it's a nice role reversal, and Ripley learns to rely upon him. If you'd only seen the first film, you'd probably be waiting for the moment he turns evil. Corporal Hicks is the main character of the Marines, and is a understated but intelligent, experienced and cunning soldier. He is charismatic and very heroic and cool. Private Hudson is the main comic relief of the film. He is a loudmouth and very cocky at the start, but as things unravel he loses his cool. He does have some funny lines and moments, and also has a good character arc and redeems himself. A very well casted and played role. Private Vasquez is a smart gunner Marine and is really cocky and gung-ho like Hudson, but more serious and hard-headed. I found her a bit obnoxious at first, but she does have a good character and redemption arc as well. Lieutenant Gorman is the commanding officer of the Marines. Once things go to hell, he quickly shows his inexperience and loses control of the situation. He is painted in a bad light, but soon begins to pull his own weight, and you end up rooting for him by the end. And the last character I'll mention is Sergeant Apone. He reminds me of the drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket and gives off that same kind of energy. He is another very charismatic character, and it makes sense why he gets killed off sooner than you'd expect, as he was the main soldier in charge who actually knew what he was doing, so it creates that chaos if the leader is killed and then everyone else is unsure what to do afterward. Of course there are more characters, all played just as well, but I think the ones I talked about here are enough to give you the idea. Plus I'm sure 99% of people watching this have seen Aliens before anyway. The special effects in Aliens is done by Stan Winston and look absolutely incredible, from the set design, the vehicles and of course the aliens themselves. The original design is mostly kept for the basic xenomorphs, but with the most noticeable change being the different head dome, which was because as this movie was going to have more action, they scrapped the translucent domes in case they'd keep getting cracked from the extra stunt work required. And then there's no forgetting that this film was our introduction to the concept of an alien queen, and they made a massive animatronic puppet which looks incredible. In the close-up shots it looks like an actual living creature. In some parts the special effects are a little dated though, mostly scenes where we see the dropship against the background, but it's easy to forgive seeing as the film is almost 40 years old at this point. To summarise, I think that Aliens is an amazing film, and is just as fun to watch on even repeat viewings when you already know what's going to happen. It builds and then releases the tension flawlessly, and always gets the atmosphere right every time in every scene. such as when the Marines are reaching the colony, and then at the end, during the fight with the Queen, there's actually no music, which makes it even more tense than a bombastic music score would, just like the T-Rex scene in Jurassic Park. It has so many memorable characters and cool moments, and in my opinion, the theatrical version is paced perfectly and there's never a dull moment. It is an expertly crafted, thrilling sci-fi action horror classic, which really feels like it's progressing things instead of retreading what the first film had already done, while still retaining the most important elements of the first. I previously said that out of all the Alien and Predator movies, Predator 1 was my favourite, but after rewatching Aliens again for this review, I might actually just be edging towards this being my favourite now actually. Of course, for a score I give Aliens a 10, as it is a perfect movie in my opinion. So that's the peak of the Alien movies now covered, but next review we'll be diving into the dregs of the franchise with Alien 3, a film I absolutely hated the 2 or 3 times I'd previously seen it, so it'll be interesting if my opinion has changed when I rewatch it again for the next review. If you don't want to miss that when it releases soon, then make sure you're subscribed and remember to like this video, and I'll catch you next time.